Hi, I'm Joshua Jeremiah. I uh, I currently live in Falls Village, Connecticut. My wife and I moved there during the pandemic, right at the top. Before that, I had been living in Astoria for about 12 years, and Queens and New York had very much become my home. I am currently not in Falls Village, Connecticut. I'm currently in St. Augustine, Florida, on my first La Traviata, which opens New Year's Eve and then closes, I think, the January 2nd. So, welcome to my room in a condo in St. Augustine, Florida.
Well, I think part of the point of these conversations is also to see what has happened over this year to all of us and to QVL, because Queen's Voice Lab at the beginning of the pandemic had just started and was essentially totally undefined except for its members. So
Yeah,
let's move on to the questions that arose over the year. What is Queen's Voice Lab to you?
Queen's Voice Lab to me is a group of vocal artists, diverse vocal artists in multiple fields that kind of came together during the pandemic, I guess, under the umbrella of Vital Opera to support each other and try and add our voices to the ongoing discussion of uh, racial justice and some of the other problems in the business that we are hopeful to find remedies to. Um, we focus a lot on our lived experiences and how our identities overlap with the business and the art that we make. And we try to work through any problems and have discussions and just really offer each other compassion and support to work through the trauma that we all suffered over the past year.
Uh, One of these questions is using three words. What is Queen's Voice Lab? Do you have an answer ready for
Oh, I
that?
do.
Ooh.
I do. That was one I was like, oh God, they're going to limit me. So I came up with uh, support, community, and progress because I think those three words really define to me what I. Two of them are words that I felt I really got out of Queen's Voice Lab, like the support and the community were things that were just, I feel like, given to me. Um, and then progress is kind of the hope for what we can put back through Queen's Voice Lab into the world and maybe make these businesses a little more equitable.
That's really lovely.
Uh, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully we'll eventually, well, I say hopefully, although, maybe not everyone feels this way. I would love it if eventually we can have some sort of public performance with all of us in the same place at the same time, or as close to kind of bring it offline and put it into the real world a little bit eventually, maybe. But until then, I think we are we're making a difference for each other, and it's just about slowly pushing that bubble open and expanding it, and hopefully we can try and make a difference for more people.
So the fourth question is worded this way: about the traditional hierarchical model of the arts world. Tell me about a challenging time where you felt you could not engage in your highest artistic self or achievement.
Yeah, I find it to be an interesting question, and kind of tricky to answer because the I like every performance I feel like is not my best, and there's always something that I want to be working on. But I think I don't like to try and chase perfection or chase my best. I'm always going to do my best given the circumstances. So I feel like the question is really about focusing on the hierarchies and structures. I've been really blessed that a lot of the companies that I've worked with, um, I've not had to deal with a lot of kind of top down oppression. Um, I work at a lot of small companies, and the smaller the company, they kind of realize that they need to make a good impression on their artists because they're not paying them well. And if they ever want to work with us again, they need to be kind. I guess one of the things that I've struggled with is when you occasionally run across a difficult colleague, um, and just the room safety, if there's any sort of stage combat or anything like that. Uh, I guess I would say, if this is a long rambling answer, um, most of the problems that I have dealt with on jobs have not necessarily been structural. They have been individual problems that the structure itself was not set up to contend with. So, it's not necessarily that the company like hired a jerk intentionally that made the room toxic for everyone, but they did hire the jerk. And there is fault in both the company for not providing a space that is safe for people, but then also that asshole.
May I ask an off script question
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
here?
yeah.
You have pointed out at times in the past year, talking to the group of QVL, that you experience particular privilege that many of the rest of us don't, being perhaps the only straight white male
Yeah.
in the entire
Yeah.
group. And do you have any reflections on how your perspective has changed, either being part of this group or just in this very interesting year, in relation to hidden hierarchies in the arts, in the opera world?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are hiring practices to begin with. Well, I mean, the business is based structurally on kind of patriarchy and white supremacy. So right from the
Only because everything is.
right. I mean, it's not a. I don't think it's a choice that like opera companies are like, what we really need to do is hold up white European supremacy, like especially if it's guys. Like a lot of administrators are women and people of color, especially in the smaller companies that I work with. They are people that couldn't necessarily find an outlet at these bigger companies, so they make their own art. So within, I've I've had the pleasure and the growing experience of working with many conductors and directors that are not straight white men. So I feel like I've been working. It kind of started happening pre-pandemic, like trying to figure out when I could use my privilege as a force for change, because privilege can be a bad thing, but it also does afford you the ability to have a louder voice. So if you can kind of use that privilege to uh, point out when things are going wrong, or allow that privilege to get your foot in the door, and then have other people be able to use their voice a little more effectively because they've got a straight white guy wingman making sure that the other people in the room are listening and attentive. Um, I think that is can be a way to use privilege for good, if that makes sense.
It does. Thanks for answering that Off the cuff. That's
I think I answered
can
it.
be a tough question. So let's go. Let's see. Um, the the fifth question is: please tell me about the earliest communities you can remember who encouraged you to grow in the arts, and how did your time in these communities contribute to you wanting to join QVL or being a part of QVL?
Sure. I grew up in the church, so just always around music. My mother was a musician, um, a church musician, and directed several choirs. So I kind of always grew up around music and performing and did it. But it really was, I was, I think, 10 years old. My mom started a performing group called Energy that was for children 6 to 16 in our local central Pennsylvania area. And it was basically a musical inclusion group. A third of the kids had either physical or mental disabilities that, some of them were almost completely nonverbal. Um, and you got in. It was not there was an audition that was not talent based. If you got an audition, you were in the group. It was just to put you in a voice type. So we did, like, I learned some sign language. We had probably about 2 hours of music a year and did many, many performances. Because my mom was the director, I was at every performance. I was like her ringer, that she always knew she would have at least one person there that knew all the parts, knew all the solos. So that kind of really jump started my love of performing and viewing it as kind of community service. Almost like we would go into retirement homes, schools, community centers, and it was very, very, very inclusive. I mean, lots of lots of positive memories about people that normally would not have been able to get into an elite performing group because they're in a wheelchair. And it was the 90s, and people were like, well, if we take this kid in a wheelchair, we're going to have to make sure everything's wheelchair, and people like that had been getting left behind. So I was in that group from 10 till 16, till I aged out of it. And even then, because my mom was the director, if she knew there weren't going to be any bases, she would just make me go and do it. Um, but I mean, I did probably 100 performances a year, like with that group. And that completely jump started um, my love of performing, my seeing it kind of immediately, the difference that it can make in an audience, and also how it can pull artists together from very different life experiences and turn you into a community. So I would say that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and when Kelvin started talking to me about it, it was the easiest thing in the. First of all, basically, if Kelvin asks me if I want to do something with him, I'll probably say yes.
I think
Because
that's why all of us are in this
yeah,
group.
I was like, oh, you wanna say hi to me during a pandemic when I'm all alone? Yes, Kelvin, I will do anything you need. Um, but yeah, I mean, the moment that he started talking about working towards inclusion, and trying to get in a diverse group of people, I knew immediately that I wanted to be on board. And hey, if I can be the token straight white guy, let's do it.
All right. Does it feel do you do you feel somehow like the token white guy?
Um, I wouldn't say no. There are times when I feel, when I definitely am aware that my lived experience is very different than other people's lived experience. So like a lot of, I would say like a lot of my trauma and victimization, while kind of a tool of the patriarchy, because that's what we live in and that's what it all is, has not been kind of visited to upon me by women, like, or by men, but by women. So like I like am a sexual abuse survivor and a couple other things that are, it did make it difficult at times during the our discussions, because it was very centered around the bad behavior of men, and that has not been my experience. It has mostly been the behavior of women. So in those conversations, I do feel like not tokenized, but I've been aware that my experience has been different. So trying to choose language that allows me to participate in the discussion and feel that I'm being able to speak my truth, to uh, use a phrase, while also being cognizant that the way I phrase it could seem like defensiveness or something like that. So, but I mean, there are other white guys in the group, just not straight white guys.
Thank you for being so open about your past, and I'm really sorry for what you have experienced, and
Thank you.
hope that we can be supportive to you as well as to everyone.
I mean, it's we're a community, all of us. Like even outside of Queen's Voice Lab, like the artistic community, I think we really, in general, strive to lift each other up and help each other through it. We understand that it's a hard business, and that all the trauma that we face as part of life, it can inform our art, but it is also something that we all have to go through and live with. So I I love you guys, and I expect all of us to always look out for each other.
That's a beautiful sentiment, and likewise. Um, I also, this is totally off topic, but calling out the bad behavior of everyone, no matter gender, race, origin. I feel like that's one of the things that gets oddly one of the things that gets squashed by the patriarchy, by the patriarchy, by by the fact that most of the people in charge at the very top of most things are in America are straight white men,
Right.
or the image of straight white men. And um,
Vestige.
right now we're in a moment where we need to call that out and reform it so hard that it's difficult to call out the bad behavior of anyone else without seeming to undermine the fight
Right.
that we're all in.
Well, it
And
kind of it ends up being like both sidesing it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
but we need to get to a place where everyone's bad behavior can be called out equally, and we will be at that point when everyone feels equal.
right.
Nonetheless, bad behavior is bad behavior. Yeah. Sorry for the random
No.
digression. Okay, back to our script. Number 6 is tell me about a time that you thought of forming a community of some kind. Would you like to answer this question?
I was thinking back, like I I don't think of myself really as a leader, like that is going to like form. I'm much more comfortable if I see something trying to integrate myself into that group. Um, I have a lot of anxiety about I don't like to throw parties for myself because nobody's going to come, and like if I form a group, what do I have to say that somebody is going to want to care to try and join me? Like I would much rather offer my efforts and energy to someone else's vision.
I have so many of those feelings as well. That
Yeah.
sounds really familiar.
It's just,
Um,
I mean, I can't, I've never started a group. Like, I was like, God, like, what was the last, I think a fantasy football league might be like literally the last time that I was like, I'm going to do a thing and start it myself and invite people. It was like 10 years ago. I started a fantasy football league, and that's about it. Uh, Other than that, my crippling anxiety prevents me from believing in myself.
how did the fantasy football league go?
It went well until a couple of years ago, and people stopped participating. So we scrapped it.
Well, it went well for a few
It
years.
did. It lasted, and I won a couple times. So really, I got a little Yahoo digital trophy. That
It was
I
a
am part of the
success.
trophy generation. Yeah.
All right. um, Number 7 is reflect on any post pandemic lessons you feel we have learned or failed to learn, whether in the singing industry or elsewhere.
Yeah, like, I know from talking with us as a group and I've been on a couple in person gigs so far since the pandemic has slowly started to come under control. And I know that we all kind of have a big hope. There's been a lot of change in us in on the artist side. And just here on this gig, talking with the singers, we all kind of realized that we have a lot of hope that certain things are going to change. I mean, right after the pandemic started, specifically around like things like force majeure, where there were people that were on jobs that were canceled, then all of a sudden they're not going to get paid any money for anything. Um, and So just hopefully trying to reorganize that pay structure in a way that kind of fairly compensates us as for our preparation. Um,
Sorry, there's a little interruption.
is that a kitty cat?
Yes.
Oh, pick me
Cat
up.
having her say.
Yes.
Sorry, please go on.
Um, and so I think on the artist side, we've done a lot of talking about things like force majeure, things about like hiring practices, audition practices. Um, and now it's just a matter of figuring out a way to change the large structural bureaucracy of the business that is, like trying to turn a big ship in water. I think it's going to take a lot of time, especially for the larger institutions. Some smaller companies are able to pivot quicker. And you saw that even in their ability to pivot to online performances during the pandemic. The companies that were able to do that, I have more hope that they will be able to incorporate some of the lessons and critiques that singers are offering to them. But I am hopeful. I mean, I look at some of the diverse casting that's happening, specifically in opera. Um, the smaller young artist companies are hiring more singers of color, and it is going to take time as those singers get more established because it's difficult to break into the business at 40. when you're ready, if you haven't been working in the business for the past 15 years and built up some sort of relationship with people. But I see younger singers of color being given opportunities that it seemed like for years they were being shut out of. Um, and even if that isn't going to change the business overnight, in 10 years, when they are not young artists, they're just artists, hopefully there will be um, more representation there. But also, there are some general directors and heads of companies. Afton Battle uh, is a Black singer, and she's now the head. I'm going to get it wrong, and that's bad. I just sang an audition for her. Preeti Gandhi was at Minnesota. I believe she's at Portland Opera now. So there's some administrators that are being turned over into specifically women of color, which I think is exciting. Hopefully that can spread out and continue to diversify. And then once we get people like that in charge of companies, they can kind of affect their local change. It's kind of like what Republicans do with judges, but it's what we're doing with general directors of companies. Get it in at the local level, and then we can do what we
Right,
want.
right.
But we won't do it for fascism. That's the.
uh, yes.
And now you've thrown up in your mouth.
No, and that's what we really need to do. And yeah, I will not bring politics. I'm censoring. Okay. Yes, exactly. Get in at the local level. In light of your time in QVL, what would you tell someone who wants to start their own support community? Would you like to answer this
do it.
question?
Yeah. Like if you have any interest in starting a support community, whether it's for singers or like I can only speak like what I got out of it over the past year and year and a half, maybe. And it's been remarkable. Kind of as I said before, it's not something that I feel I would have been empowered to do myself, to start myself, but having it as a resource, just being able and kind of having a regular time to see other people's faces that there were times when I didn't want to show up because I was just so depressed and not well, that having it on my schedule as the only thing that week like forced me to even just fake it a little bit, fake being okay to be around people. It made a huge difference in the past year and a half. So if you have any interest in doing it, please do it. There are people out there that need it.
Do you feel like it would have worked at any other time in our
It's tricky.
history?
I think it could have. It wouldn't have been the same. And we all have such crazy different schedules that the likelihood of all of us being available, I mean, we were very rarely all available throughout the whole year to begin with, but for the most part, we had, we would be missing one or two people. I think it would have happened, but I don't think it would have been. I mean, Kelvin asked, so I would have said yes,
Right.
but it probably would not have been as instrumental in maintaining good mental health, because any other time there's probably not a pandemic happening. There's not the need for extreme community and mental wellness.
Yeah, it was really fortuitous, I think, for a lot of us that
Yeah.
this arose right at the beginning of the pandemic. I like you hope that we go on to do something live and actually involving music.
I mean, I think it could be cool, even if it's like, even if it's just pick anything that you want to do, even if it would just be for us. I would love to just be in a room with you guys all in person and do anything.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Bring it
Agreed.
into the real world.
Agreed. So, what would your dream job be if you weren't a musician? And what about that appeals to you or even informs your work as a musician?
That was another one that it was when I saw the question. It's such an like I cannot like the way my life has laid itself out. Something would have to be very different for me to not be a musician. Um, it's kind of I love music. It has been the most formative thing about my life since probably I was 10, maybe a little younger. Um, I do view, so I kind of got to my answer this way. I was like, well, to me, music is service. Like it is, there is ego in it because like it makes me happy when people clap for me. Like I did a good job. Yay. Good me. Like, but ultimately, I do it for the audience. Like it is service that I try to give to other people. So I think if I wasn't a musician, I would try to be in service in some way. I think education um, speaks to me. Maybe a therapist or social worker or nursing. Um, can I just say I would rather be a well-paid musician? Like instead of just being an artist, I would like to be a well-paid artist
That's your dream
with
job.
healthcare
Just
and
what you do,
retirement.
just what you do, but well
Yeah,
paid.
exactly. What I do now, but not even well-paid, like $75,000 a year, it would be like like that would be extraordinarily well paid. I would laugh at making that much money a year. So just that. But also, it's tricky. Yeah, music. It's all I. It's that's it.
That's
If I
beautiful.
couldn't do music, I would find something else to do. But like with my life laid out as it is, I'm kind of doing my dream job, just not for as much money and stability as I would like. So my job now, but better is
Right.
my answer.
Are there any projects that you'd like to plug?
There is a project I would like to plug. Um, I'm currently in St. Augustine, Florida, on a Traviata, but that is not the job because I think by the time this video goes out, that job will be done the next day. But this January, I'm singing. It's a very local job. If you happen to be in Bozeman, Montana, in February, we are doing a completely rewritten version of the Mikado. It's called the Montana Mikado, and everything is set with like Montanans. So they've completely rewritten the entire book. I'm playing Pooba, but in this production, it's Mr. Merriweather. And it is kind of seeking to avoid all of the problematic trappings of performing the Mikado while keeping the satire and the music and the storyline relatively intact. Like three little maids from school is three little maids from Instagram. It's updated. There's lots of swearing, lots of kind of Bozeman, Montana political in jokes because it was written by, I think, a local Shakespeare director or something. Soren is his name. I believe his name is Soren. Or it's not, and I'm an asshole. Uh, but very excited about that. That is with Intermountain Opera in Bozeman, Montana. Hopefully, kind of reinvigorating one of these older problematic works that don't. There's not really a way to do that show as written that isn't racist and problematic. So excited to see how if we can kind of breathe new life into this piece and see what happens.
I feel like Gilbert and Sullivan would have been proud.
I think so. It's very clever. Like reading through the lyrics, I think it's gonna work really well. Especially, um, I'm not from Bozeman, so I feel like I don't get all of the little in jokes, but there are a lot of in jokes, and I feel like he's specifically like written people's like board members' names like into the show, and like it's like all these little. So it maybe this production might not play everywhere, but if it can give us a blueprint on how to make some changes to some of these pieces, I think it's exciting.
I mean, Gilbert and
And then
Sullivan
after
is.
that, I'm gonna be a dad. That's my next
That's
favorite. That's
right.
my
That's your
next
next
big
thing.
thing.
I don't know that you need to plug that. That's going to happen whether you like it or not.
Oh, I'm plugging it. March, March,
Woohoo!
March 2022.
Yay! Well, congratulations on that very exciting project, the
Thanks.
being a dad.
Yeah. Well, and
Um,
Mikado is exciting too.
Indeed.
It's hard to put into words um, all the ways exactly, Kitty. All the ways QVL has been important and insightful and helpful over the past year. Um, who it's difficult to know what a subtraction from your life could result in. Uh, so all I can say is thank you and the rest of QVL for showing up and helping to get us all through this past year. It was tough, but we did it.
Agreed. And thank you likewise.